remember, the legislative branch, what is their main purpose? Making laws, okay? And the executive branch, what's their main purpose? Carry out or enforce those laws. And now you got the judicial branch. Their main priority is to interpret the laws. They interpret the laws. And that's a pretty powerful thing. They interpret the laws, including the Constitution. The Constitution says you can't be cruelly or unusually punished. What does that mean? Can we tar and feather you? What about hanging people? I don't know. Can we? What's cruel and unusual to one person might not be cruel and unusual to somebody else. It's up to the judiciary to define that. What about electrocuting them? It's electric. Boogie, woogie, woogie. Yeah. That's fantastic. That was the point. All right. So the judiciary defines what the law means. If somebody has a question about what the law means, it's the judicial branch that gets to decide. Now, the structure of the judicial branch, okay? There's two angles that can get you to the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. We're mainly focusing on this left side. In the federal courts, our national level courts, you've got three distinct layers. If the U.S. government charges you with a crime, you'd start in district courts. If you don't like their answer, you can go to the Court of Appeals. And if you don't like their answer, you can go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay? You can also appeal cases up if you're charged with a state crime. If West Virginia says you've committed a crime, you can go from those courts to the state Supreme Court and to the U.S. Supreme Court. But since this class mostly focuses on the national government, we're mostly focusing on federal courts. Question?
Can you take just any case to the U.S. Supreme Court?
You can try to appeal cases to the Supreme Court, okay? But one of the neat things about the Supreme Court is if they don't want to hear your case, they can just say, we're turning it down. It's pretty nice, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. Say that again.
What if it was a state law that you violated and not a federal law?
If you, for example, let's say that you get picked up for possession of marijuana, right? And it's just a few ounces of marijuana, which technically is a state and federal crime, okay? The federal government says we don't deal with the small people like that. We deal with, we'll let the state handle that. So the state of West Virginia would be like West Virginia versus Trisha Bose and the matter of possession of marijuana. And so you'd start hearing state courts, and if you didn't like their decision, you can appeal it up. But even if you don't like what the West Virginia State Supreme Court has to say, you can go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Does the court name have to stay the same throughout all of the cases?
No. Talk about why in a minute. All right. So that's the structure of the system. Okay. Now, for our purposes, there's two main types of law. Criminal law is the first type. And that's the one that everybody always loves. Who doesn't love criminal law? What's a criminal law? What does that mean if I break a law? Become a criminal. What does that mean?
I think
Homicide in general.
Also, the only criminal law is murder and homicide.
Civil law is like suing and other.
You're giving me examples. You're not telling me what it is. What happens if I commit a crime?
you get charged.
Yeah, but what am I doing? You're disobeying. That's close. For our purposes, criminal law deals with behavioral standards. We set behavioral standards for society. We say, here's how the acceptable ways to behave are. You don't get to murder people. That's an example. You can't beat people up. You can't steal. We have behavioral standards. And whether people want to admit it or not, they're also moral standards. Like, hey, society does not tolerate this. That's criminal law. Yeah, criminal law is good. How many people watch Law and Order, any type of Law and Order show? They're fantastic. You can learn a lot about the criminal procedures there. If the U.S. government charges you with a crime, we all know this too. What's the penalty if you get convicted of breaking a law? You go to jail. You can get fined too, but you're probably going to go to jail. That'd be unfortunate. Nobody wants to spend time in the clink. And when the case comes up, you're going to see it read like this. If the U.S. government charges you with a crime, it'll be the United States versus whoever. So let's say, for instance, that Bailey over here is going to commit a crime. What crime would you like to be charged with? Bank robbery. It's a respectable crime. All right, people won't mess with you. All right, so it would be United States versus Bailey Rivest because the U.S. government is the prosecution. They're the ones saying, we think you've done something wrong, and we're going to try to put you in jail for it. Oh, you've violated a behavioral standard. What do you think, Bailey? I'll be your attorney. Now, the government tries to prosecute you, but if you violate a state law, like let's say you violated a law in West Virginia, it would be West Virginia versus Bailey Rivest. Okay? It depends on who says you violated a standard. Everybody with me so far? Fantastic. Most cases, most criminal cases never go to court. They get a plea bargain. Most cases are going to get a plea bargain. What's a plea bargain? Quinlan, help us out.
You to admit that you did, you're guilty, but so you avoid the trial, and the program saves money, so they'll give you less jail sentence. Maybe if instead of jail sentence, you have to pay a fine, lesser fine.
All right. They essentially, the government says, if you go ahead and plead guilty and save us the time, the energy, and the money of having a trial, then we'll give you a lesser sentence in return. So in the case of United States versus Bailey Rivest, she's facing up to 30 years in prison because she has robbed many banks. All right. But Bailey's also a generous criminal. She never hurts anyone, and she gives away a lot of the money she steals. And the U.S. government knows this. And they say, look, if we have to have a trial, you might get a jury that's really sympathetic, and she might not get convicted. So let's give her an offer. We're like, Bailey, instead of 30 years in prison, we're going to offer you 5 to 7 years, and you'll be out in 3 years for good behavior. And Bailey's like, I like that deal. Question?
Are we going to talk about pleading no contest?
No.
Just guilty pleas?
Sorry. But you can plead, like, for example, you can plead what's called, as part of an agreement, you can plead what's called no contest, which really just means that when you say no contest, you're not admitting you're guilty. You're just saying, I realize there's enough evidence that I'd probably get found guilty. All right? So you plead guilty in exchange for a lesser sentence. How often do you think they do this? A whole lot. Over 95% of the time now, you see plea bargains used. Okay? Sir?
They were really close with Derek Chauvin to getting him to accept a plea deal, but then he was talked out of it.
We'll see. All right? Now, the U.S. government says, look, we plea bargain a lot because, well, why do you think the U.S. government offers these people a plea bargain? Not you. Hold on. Somebody else. Why would the government offer these people a plea bargain?
Keep people out of jail?
Not to keep them out of jail.
You already said it, didn't you? They're saving time, money.
They're saving time, but why would they do that? Why would I offer Bailey Rivest, like, even if I thought, let's say that I'm like, there's a decent chance you get found not guilty, but I still like our case against her. Why would I offer her this? Why do I want to expedite the process? They could focus on more important cases that need to be tried because, look, if everybody actually went to trial, or even if a quarter of people actually went to trial, what would it do to our court system? It would completely jam it up. We would never have time to get through anything. We don't have enough lawyers, enough courts, and enough judges to get these cases tried. So we're like, hey, Bailey, we're going to cut you a break because you never hurt anybody in your cases. And so we're going to offer you a plea agreement. But Kate White over here is a serial killer. And we really have to focus on putting her away. We're not going to offer her a plea bargain. She's going to prison for the rest of her life. Okay, not that you'd ever hurt anybody, but you get the idea. All right, now, also part of our court system, we have what's also called the public defender system. And this is an important aspect of our federal courts. If you don't have an attorney, what will the government do? They'll give you one. They will provide an attorney to you. and the taxpayers pay for it. Everybody has the right to an attorney, regardless of whether or not you're financially able to afford one. Public defenders, they get paid by the government to come and represent people who are too poor to afford an attorney. And a lot of them do it just because they believe in the system. They're like, hey, you know what? I hate it that somebody would be so poor that they don't have the ability to pay for an attorney. Because if you didn't afford it in the past, if you couldn't afford an attorney, who would have to represent you at the trial? Yourself. And that is a terrible thing to have to endure. Yes.
By the way, that's not on this outline.
What?
The
Public. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I just wanted to let you know, so you can do it next time.
Isn't that Gideon's, what's the case?
We'll talk about Gideon versus Wainwright. Yeah. Don't worry, we'll get that one later. All right. Now, public defenders, a lot of them just kind of itch for the fight. They like to take on cases like this. I have a former student who is a public defender out in Oregon, and he says he loves it. He's like, a lot of the people I deal with, they're just people who made one dumb mistake because they're desperate in life. And he said most of them aren't bad or evil people that need to be off the streets.
What if they are you forced to and you don't feel comfortable doing it? Are you still
You do it anyway. Part of your job, if you're a public defender, like let's say you work for the public defender's office, I'm like, Trisha, you got to defend this murderer, like this guy accused of murder, okay? And you're like, but Scalise, I don't want to. I'm like, tough luck. You don't necessarily have to believe in their case, okay? Your job is to give them the best representation and give them the best possible outcome. So, maybe Trisha has to, like, there's a guy that's on trial for murder. And she's like, look, this guy, there's a mountain of evidence. She has to look at it and say, it's not my job to figure out whether he did it or not. My job is to advocate for him like he didn't do it. You have to be a very zealous representative for your client, even if they are a piece of scum, okay? Because we believe everybody deserves to have an attorney at their trial, to have the best possible representation. And that's hard to do. And that's why you don't take a job with the public defender system unless you believe that. Because, if you're a private attorney, like let's say that Bailey over here works for a private, she's a private attorney and she's like, I'm my own boss. I don't answer to anybody. And I don't take a case if I don't feel like taking a case.
That sounds really bad. Like you have a person like that who enjoys his job and then he gets really bad case where he knows the person is guilty.
Well, a lot of times a lot of attorneys will tell you one thing they never do is they never ask them point blank if they did it because they don't want to know. You have to create this moral vacuum where you're like, it doesn't matter. My job is to represent them as best as humanly possible. And that's hard to do. Okay? Now, criminal law, only one aspect of things. Let's talk about civil law. Civil law deals with controversies between two parties. This deals with controversies between two parties. It's not when you violate a behavioral standard. It's when, let's see here, it's when Bailey loans me her Harry Styles record collection. And she gets it back, but it's damaged. The records are scratched and they're ruined. And she's like, Scalise, you're responsible. And I'm like, well, I didn't violate any criminal laws. And she's like, well, that might be true, but you're responsible for the damage of this, and I'm going to sue you in court. When you think civil law, think lawsuit. Right? She may not be able to send me to jail, but what can she possibly recover from me? Money or replacement records. Aha! Civil law deals with lawsuits. Not quite. Okay? In a civil case, you got two sides, the plaintiff and the defendant. The plaintiff is the person who's bringing the case into court. And in this case, Scalise versus Cabell County Schools. I'm going to sue Cabell County Schools because they have made an insufferable work environment for the last 15 years. And it's caused me to develop a terrible pain in my jaw. And I'm going to sue them for not just the pain in my jaw, but emotional trauma. What do you think? You think I got a shot? Probably not. A couple years ago, a kid from Kanawha County. He was 24 at the time. He sued Kanawha County schools trying to claim that they didn't properly educate him and prepare him for the real world. And they were like, dude, at some point you got to take some responsibility for yourself. Plus, it's like, I can't really prepare you for the world, not everything.
Did that Miss Ashford thing turn into a civil?
It could have, but it didn't. I think they settled that. Like, I'm pretty sure they probably, I'll explain later, but there'll probably be mild consequences from that. Now, in a lawsuit, okay, you can try to sue just about anybody. You can take almost any suit to court, but in order to have a chance, you have to demonstrate what's called standing. Okay? Standing means you have to show that you've been damaged somehow. You've been harmed or damaged in some capacity. That demonstrates standing. Okay? So Bailey would have to come in with her damaged records and be like, Scalise is responsible. Look at these damaged records. How will I ever get over the loss of these priceless Harry Styles artifacts? Now, when we think of lawsuits, though, a lot of times, do we think of frivolous lawsuits? Do people try to sue for just anything? Oh, yeah. All right. And you all are probably familiar with this. You remember familiar with the lady who sued McDonald's? The hot coffee that she spilled in her lap? All right. It's been about 20 years now, and let me tell you this. This lady spilled hot coffee. She was holding it between her legs at the drive-thru, and she was reaching to get another item of food from the people in the drive-thru, and the coffee spilled out into her lap. And she won over $1 million from McDonald's. Hold on. Let me tell the story here. Now, the short blurb makes it in the news, and people are like, "Oh, that's ridiculous." But here's what her clever attorney did. Her attorney went around to the different coffee locations in the area, and she found out that McDonald's was brewing their coffee like 15 to 20 degrees hotter than other places. And they didn't tell you how hot the coffee was. And not only that, this woman had pictures after her hospital stay. She had pictures. What does really hot coffee do to your skin if it gets on it? She had second and third degree burns on her genitals. Okay? And I don't know about you all, but no amount of money is worth second or third degree burns on your genitals. All right? All right? Now, that aside, when a jury saw those pictures and they found out that McDonald's was brewing their coffee really hot, and they look at all the evidence, they're like, you know what? This lady is entitled. And she was a little old lady, all right, which made her even more sympathetic. So a jury looks at this and says, you know what? You're absolutely right. She does deserve money. And so they gave her an award, a large award. Now, the judge did reduce that a little bit and said maybe that's too much. But after like the attorney got his fees, I mean, she ends up getting like $800,000 or $900,000, which is a lot of money. However, would you really trade places with her? No. Right. Initially, she just wanted the hospital bills and a little bit of something. I mean, she wasn't being outrageous, but McDonald's refused. Okay. Here's another example. How many people love to eat popcorn? I love popcorn. Popcorn's so good, especially when you get hordes of butter on it. All right. But if you eat too much popcorn, it can be bad for you. And one California man found that out the hard way. I love eating popcorn, but this man ate 2 bags of popcorn a day for not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, but 7 years. Oh no. Years, this man ate 2 bags of popcorn every day. Okay? And he went to the doctor because he was having breathing troubles. All right? And when the doctor told him there is such a condition called popcorn lung, and some of the chemicals they use to make popcorn that goes into the mass-produced items that you can get in the store can cause deterioration of your lungs and your lung capacity. Hold on. We still have time. We don't have time. We'll talk more about popcorn lung tomorrow.